by fear. I'm clutching you so tight, afraid to lose. I retreat more each night. Where is my voice? I've muted myself, and in my shyness, it's you I repel. I will find my way to express my voice. I must find my way to ignite my spark. Find my way to me so we can be we. Find my way. The fractures between us rise into view. I cling to the scraps of the care that falls through. Where is my strength? I've crumbled apart, hiding from the truth. I've shattered my heart, but I will find my way to regain my strength. I must find my way to restore my will. Find a way to me so we can be we. Find my way. Here is this moment to take a chance to go on alone or grow and advance. I will find my way to express my voice. I must find my way to ignite my spark. Find my way to me so we can be we. Find my way. I will find my way to regain my strength. I must find my way to restore my will. Find my way to me so we can be we. Find my way. Find my way. I'll find my way.
Happy Sunday, everybody. Thank you for finding your way to my show, Sunday Live, aptly named, 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock every week. Also, we usually have an after party, so stick around to like 6:30 for other extra juicy bits from our guests. Hey, I hope you're doing all well. I feel great that I can get out and about. I got out and about today. It was a beautiful sunny day. My wife gets her second shot this Tuesday, and so within a couple weeks, both of us are going to be out. I was driving around and driving back home. I saw people out at restaurants, people out at brew pubs and stuff. It's like, wow, it's it seems crazy and alien, but it's happening, folks. And so get out there, get your flu shot, help everybody else not have to do this again in 6 months. Okay. I'm coming to you from Seattle, Washington, and my sidekick is coming to you from Berkeley, California. Let's go check in with him. Hey, Joe, I need to put you on the actual screen. Right now, they just got a pretty pattern, unless you've become a pretty pattern.
Well, not terribly pretty at this point, but I'll take what I can get. Good afternoon/evening.
Absolutely. I'm looking at a 1-point font here, and hopefully I select full screen. Oh, look at that. 1-point font, nailed it. Yeah, so you're all vaccinated up, right?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I went in about a couple of weeks ago almost, and I consider myself quite late to the game. Everybody else I knew had a jump on me in terms of the vaccine. So I figured, well, I'll get my one shot and then wait an entire 30 days, get my next shot, and then wait an entire 2 weeks. And then by August, maybe something like that, I would have been free and clear. Everybody else I know would have been clear in advance. So I show up, and suddenly, unbeknownst to me, I have the option to take the Johnson & Johnson shot, which is one and done. So it was like, my feeling was like being late for my own flight and ending up in first class.
Nice.
So I'm very happy and relieved that that was the case. So I think by Thursday morning, I shall be free and clear, so to speak.
Awesome. Awesome. And I know you're an out and about kind of guy, so it's great to have that just, not on the back of your mind. I know the chances are low, but man, it's just not worth it. So glad to know
Indeed.
you're going to be safe.
And I'll wear a mask regardless because of the fact, just for out of principle, out of respect and out of principle, because you can't tell who's vaccinated, who's not vaccinated. So I'll default to wearing the mask because A, the discipline's there, B, I have plenty of masks, and C, there may be forest fires and we'll be putting them on anyway.
This is true. Even up here in Washington last year, we had forest fires and smoke coming in, even to Western Washington. So yeah, there's still a value. Yeah, I agree with the same thing. I wear the mask out of respect because I don't know, other people don't know my situation. I don't know their situation. So I'm making it clear to them that, hey, we're good here. And, we won't know until 6 months, a year from now, really the what's what, right? That's the reality. We know a lot of stuff about COVID strains and viruses, but the reality of any given strain or variant, you know as an after effect. So stay safe, Why not? Why not? Don't become a carrier or which will incubate a variant and bring the whole world to its knees. We just don't need that kind of science fiction future. Speaking of science fiction, we have a science fiction author as our guest today. And I know we've been having a lot of musicians, but especially early on in the show, we had artists. We had a professor of art down in Florida and stuff. And we've been really hyper-focused on the musicians as of late. So I wanted to bring in someone who wasn't a musician. I shouldn't say that. He's done some music, but his focus was really on science fiction and literature. And let's see. I just will request that he unmutes to join us once I finish the title thing here. That person is BJ West, writer, filmmaker, and meme. I haven't given the meme award to anybody on this show in a year. I really think BJ carries off that concept. Let me show a little piece of something he did a few years ago.
In just under a minute, ABC7 will make the federally mandated switch from analog television to digital TV. I'm Michael Finn, ABC7 News. Remember, to continue seeing our signal, you must have one of the following three things: a TV that is digital ready, cable or satellite service, or a converter box. The conversion will take just a few seconds and will be complete shortly after midnight. And remember, if you're getting a television signal over the air using a converter box or a digital television, you may need to rescan your channels. To rescan, press Menu on your remote and choose the Channel Scan function. Your TV set or converter box will then find all the channels available in your area. If you still have questions about the digital TV transition, please call these numbers. 1-888-CALL-FCC, or for local help, dial 211. You can also get more information online by going to www.dtvanswers.com.
Hey, BJ, are you out there?
I am.
I just like that little blast from the past. YouTube's an amazing thing.
I have no idea what you just showed, so I can't tell you.
It was the termination of analog TV. You had filmed this clip of it, and the station going dead. And I thought,
right.
You're a science fiction writer, and yet that video wasn't intended as a piece of science fiction, but it is.
It certainly feels that way now.
So you've lived through the science fiction future. How's it going?
It's going good. It's going really good.
You've had a plague, the United States falling into a dictatorship, analog TV going off channel. I mean,
Still waiting for my flying cars.
isn't that amazing? Out of all the things, the flying car still stumps us.
It's true. I've got friends who are working on it though.
Yeah, tell us about it. Can would they kill us or something?
Yeah, I think I'd probably get arrested.
Nice. I do see this flying car. Like I'm a YouTuber. I don't really watch broadcast TV. I watch YouTube videos, and I'm always seeing the flying car, like a low, an image of a flying car, and it's like it's almost here, and then it doesn't happen.
Well, it's like full immersion VR. It's been almost here for 30 years now.
That's another great one. That is a great point. When I was in Paris a year and a half ago, I was living with a friend. I was helping reboot his software company, and he hooked me up. I hadn't put on an Oculus. I think it was an Oculus. And he had me doing this whole 3D stuff. He cleared the room, put a swivel chair in the middle, and you just, after a little while, you get lost in it. And I went for a bike ride, and there actually was a whole arcade. It looked like a movie theater, but it was all just 3D virtual reality game center.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, it's starting to arrive. But I remember back in like 96 or something, people putting on some goggles, and what happened? Why didn't it happen?
It was terrible. That's what happened. It gave people headaches. It gave them nausea. It weighed like 50 pounds on your neck. And the graphics back then were terrible. So it wasn't fun.
What? It has to be fun to sell.
I know, it's a crazy idea.
Yeah. And you were creating content back then, cyberpunk style content at Atari,
Certainly
right?
tried to. Yeah, I was at Atari working on a game called Black Ice, White Noise, and we thought this was going to be the big breakout action adventure game for the Atari Jaguar, which crashed and burned pretty much on launch.
Oh, I worked for a couple tech companies during the 90s where I got to have that experience. It's a fascinating thing, right? Where these companies are kind of all consuming, where it becomes your life, right? And that project becomes your life.
Yeah, every waking hour, and that's most of the hours.
One of my gigs, I had a futon underneath the desk. And people, I tell people that, and they look at me funny, like, "What? No, we're gonna go IPO, man. We're gonna make it." So that didn't pan out, but you continued to do video production.
Oh yeah, I worked at Maxis, which was a division of Electronic Arts. Worked on this little game called The Sims. I think a couple people played it.
Did that crash and burn too? Never heard.
Now that one just took off.
Yeah.
And completely consumed the studio.
Was it? Did you guys know that it was going to be big? Like, you're working like this thing's going to be the deal.
I don't think they did it first, but certainly when they were getting close to launch, everybody was getting excited. It was getting a lot of attention, a lot of traction, and EA basically said, "Stop working on everything else. This is our chicken now, all in one basket."
Wow. Well, it certainly paid off.
It was fun, and it changed gaming for a while at least.
Well, I just read something. Was it this morning or yesterday? I don't know. Sims still comes up as I think it went from being a popular game into being a cultural icon. Right.
No, for a while it was the #1 best-selling franchise of all time.
Wow.
I think FIFA Soccer took it back after a while.
That's something to have pushed soccer out of the #1 spot.
Yep, at least for like 2 years, I think.
So you've been in the industry, you've worked on games, you're a fan of science fiction as well as an author of science fiction. And are you still doing any video stuff today?
Occasionally. I've got a friend who has a band called Mind Furniture, and I do music videos for them occasionally. The last one was called Here in the Future, very effects intensive. Everything that wasn't a human being on screen, I did.
And where would people find that video?
Either on Vimeo or YouTube, or you can go to kelpentertainment.com, and I link to everything I've ever done pretty much.
Okay, so that's KELP entertainment.com.
Correct.
Awesome. I will definitely check that out. I don't have that video in today's show. I'm very fascinated to see your recent videos. Folks, check out kelpentertainment.com and see some of BJ's latest works. Now, fast forward, you were doing this cyberpunk video game for Atari in the early 90s, but now you are authoring cyberpunk books. How'd that all come about?
Well, there's a very direct connection between those two. The game we were doing for Atari never came out. Atari went under, we were all sacked, and it was never seen by anybody. And I thought there were a lot of great stories that we had come up with for that game that it was a shame to let them go to waste. So I cannibalized them, repurposed them, kind of broke them down to their very structure and rewrote them from scratch as novels. And we got the Splicefire series.
And that's, I'm showing folks here, the 3 books here. Teeth of, I won't try to pronounce this. That's not my forte. Rikasha, I'll have you do it. The Raptor's Nest and Temple of Andromeda. So you got the 3 books. All 3 books are currently out?
Yes.
Cool.
And those are on Amazon.
Nice. And so will we be able to get a little taster of these books today?
Yeah, I've got some sections I can read for you.
Cool. Why don't we do a couple different sections? Maybe do like a 1 minute now, and every time we come back, we'll throw another one in there.
Okay, sounds good. I'm going to start pretty much right at the very beginning of book 1, and give you a little sense of the environment and the flavor of the writing. The 9-foot-tall glass letters spelling out Club Shatter exploded into thousands of razor-sharp shards that sparkled and flashed with reflected neon as they cascaded to the sidewalk below. Had the glass been real and not an augmented reality display, the block-long line of would-be revelers waiting to get into the club would have been shredded into lunch meat. A handful of noobs gasped, then applauded, causing the jaded regulars to smirk and roll their eyes. 2 enormous bouncers stood next to the doors, biceps the size of loaves of bread, straining against the sleeves of their skin-tight black t-shirts, pecs stretching out the block letters of security into an extended font across their chests. It was Saturday night, and as usual, the club was at full capacity. Getting in was predicated by somebody else coming out, and the farther back you were in line, the worse your chances were. But even being in line was a party.
Nice. That reminds me of Club FX, and I know we both have a connection with that.
Yep, that was our haunt in the 90s, so definitely one of the inspirations for Club Shatter.
Okay.
That takes me back. That takes me back from DNA Lounge to Club FX. That's it. Sometimes the way you looked had a effect on whether or not you were getting in. A lot of secretaries didn't get in, but a lot of guys that were dressed just right not only got in, but they paid half price. That was my DNA.
Yeah, at FX, I was like halfway on the crew, so I got in usually on the sly.
I remember going in, and it used to be like an old porn theater or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the Pink Pussycat back in the 70s.
And you'd walk in, so they had like the popcorn counter was after you got past security, you were in this little lobby, and I remember sitting there, my black leather trench coat, the long hair. By the way, I'm jealous that you still got your hair. I'm balding now. And I'm sitting there, and a gal sidles up behind me and says, "Here's my latest code," and puts a floppy disk in my, jacket. And I'm like, thanks. And that stuff happened.
That's totally cyberpunk.
It totally happened. It was like I was doing like I was on a team at San Jose State that was writing some of the first websites with Mozilla for the Mozilla browser and stuff like that. So I was studying and going to school this, and so people were using FX as this sort of way station for info. And then the other cyberpunk experience I had in the real world relates to you as well, because I got this phone call from your best buddy, Mr. Hudak. And Hudak and I never really connected or anything, but all of a sudden, I can't remember. There was no cell phones back there. How did he get in touch with me? I don't even know, right? But somehow I found myself in front of a 7-Eleven in Palo Alto with him in the passenger seat of my car. Okay. He convinced me to run this errand for him. And I was like, yeah, I got some time. And then some gal, very well-to-do, obviously, like, wow, okay, who is this person? He comes over my beat-up Pinto. He's like, hold on a moment. He jumps out of the car, walks over. A little exchange happens on the hand. And he gets back into my car. I'm like, oh, shit, what did I get myself into? And PJ, I know PJ. We're all cool. So what's going on here? I said, Hudak, man, you got to let me know what's going down. He goes, that was her PhD thesis.
The hard stuff.
Yeah. I was like, okay, you guys are living the life, not just talking about it. So for you, how did your connection with the whole cyberpunk genre of science fiction start?
Well, I was already into sci-fi. I mean, even since I was a little kid. But William Gibson broke it all open for me, and there was no stopping after that. He's still the best, by the way.
And for folks that don't know William Gibson, he wrote a book called
Shame on You.
Shame on you, twice over. Neuromancer was the first big one, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the whole Sprawl trilogy was what broke him onto the scene.
Okay. And then is that what Neuromancer is a part of, the Sprawl trilogy? It's been a while.
Yeah, it's the first book.
Okay.
It's Neuromancer, Count Zero, and Mona Lisa Overdrive.
Okay, yes. I was going to think I'd only read Neuromancer, but I did read back in the day all three of those books. And then who's the guy that did Snow Crash?
Neil Stevenson.
Okay. I remember reading Snow Crash, which also had that kind of sprawl of society element.
Yeah.
I think it was like some servers on some floating boats that are all strapped together in the ocean, like pirate radio. Pirate Enginenet.
I'm still shocked that one hasn't been made into a movie.
I remember it being very cinematic and action orientated.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be awesome. Better than Ready Player One, for sure.
I've not seen the film. Don't bother.
I mean, the visuals are gorgeous, but it's all 1980s retro nostalgia. That's like, yeah, what's more cyberpunk than the 80s?
Well, for folks that, it came up in that time. So I see you have a certain T-shirt on that references the late 80s.
Yeah. Well, that was early 90s, but yeah, this is not pretending to be cutting edge.
How so? Do explain.
Well, because it's a magazine. A, what's a magazine? B, doesn't exist anymore.
That's a good point. It's like, we used to read this magazine of the future that by the time we got to the
physical
future,
media, Grandpa.
Yeah. That makes me think of like how for cyberpunk, for some, and maybe that's just where Ready Player One went wrong. It's like the feeling of cyberpunk has an inherently late 80s, early 90s vibe, the beginning of the techno scene, all of that, in the way that maybe our, Tom Swift and his flying rocket and all that 1950s sci-fi will ever, even if the stories would hold up today, they're just so tied to the era they were written in, right?
Oh yeah, there's still a strong vein of that in space opera.
Oh, that's a good point. Space opera definitely has continued that. And I was also thinking about, we were talking the other day about a TV show called UFO, came out in the 1970, and it was set in 1980. So it was what 1980 was going to look like through the lens of 1970.
And we could only wish that it had.
Although I hear those cars were pretty hard to drive.
I can imagine.
Big metal cars, big glass domes, and all this sort of stuff. So having said that, how are you taking this material from, inspired by the late 80s, early 90s, and how do you make them current in your books?
I tried as much as possible to, while keeping the kind of stylistic tropes that you find in cyberpunk, but moving the story to a very direct look at the future that's around the corner from now.
Got it. I once got to meet Ray Bradbury. He came to San Jose State, did a lecture, and someone in the audience stood up and said, "Mr. Bradbury, what is the difference between science fantasy and science fiction?" And he looked at the person like, "This is so easy." He said, "Science fiction can happen, science fantasy can't."
Perfect.
There is no planet Tatooine, therefore Star Wars is science fantasy. And there is a planet Jupiter, therefore 2001 is science fiction. So how do you put yourself squarely in science fiction, or do you incorporate some fantasy?
I try to have very little fantasy as much as possible. Every now and then for dramatic effect, I might stray a little bit, but even then I feel like I'm cheating. But mostly I try to go for pure extrapolation from where we are now and where we could end up.
All right.
It's funny you say that. Isaac Asimov, about 20 plus years ago, well, back when he was alive, obviously, Isaac Asimov wrote an article that I've been trying to find ever since, called "Prediction as a Side Effect." How sci-fi authors going back into the late 1800s would make these predictions that inevitably became true. Like travel to the moon, from Méliès to Neil Armstrong, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Jules Verne in From the Earth to the Moon nailed the launch site for the first trip to the moon by 30 miles from Cape Kennedy in Florida. Because that's just where the math goes. If you want to take off, you want to be as close to the equator as you can. US has only so much land close to the equator, so Florida's kind of the solution to the formula. And when you think like that in your fiction, you end up arriving at the solution that's just logical.
You mean science can actually predict things and give you best options?
Fake news.
He wasn't into those two sticks that you walk around with. Let's find where the launch point should be.
It's all by ley lines.
Oh yes, based on the pyramids and all that.
Right.
It's funny how simple, and I think this is what Bradbury was getting at in his answer. It's not science fiction, so to speak, to be able to do this. You look at the science, you gather knowledge and data, and based on that, you can make reasonable predictions for the near future.
Right. And then, of course, you twist those however you need to for an exciting story, because it has to be drama also.
That's a good point. Not everybody wants to sit and watch 2001.
Right.
I mean, you and I probably, it's my #1 favorite film.
I've lost count of how many times.
And I love it because it has that it divorces itself from the drama for the most part. But
Except what's more dramatic than the evolution of man?
yeah, but for a lot of people, well, okay, I'll do the devil's advocate on this. For a lot of people, it's explosions,
Right.
vehicles burning lots of gasoline, jumping over things, people punching each other. Um, Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I don't even consider that drama. That's distraction.
how so? Explain that.
Uh, Drama is about story. It's about consequences. It's about people being forced to make really tough decisions where there's no real clear indicator which way they should go. And you put yourself in their shoes and go, oh, I don't want to do that. That's horrible. That's drama. That's, you should be gripped by the story and also a little glad it's not really you.
That's a very good point. I'd say
That's
that a
perfect. It
lot.
makes our problems look a lot smaller when we read about other people rising to the challenge of seemingly insurmountable odds.
Right.
And as for movies, all the special effects and whatnot, I think is a distraction. It's it's the Trojan horse of imagination, what's supposed to pass as imagination that gets handed to us as a high fructose corn syrup of what should be good plot and good storyline. And that's why
Right.
books will always champion over movies.
Well, and the reality is, if you make a book that meets that standard, a lot of people won't be interested. The movies well, again, 2001 is kind of the gold standard of this. That it's brilliant and it's deep and it is moving, but there's no explosions, there's no shootouts, there's no fistfights, there's no car chases. So it's kind of relegated to the sideshow of intelligent cinema.
I love this. I'm going to show a clip because I think Joe really hit on something here. He said, what did you say about special effects, Joe?
It's just not only a distraction, but the Trojan horse that the media ships us that's supposed to pass for a good storyline.
Okay, so
and
I'm gonna put on the table here that I think BJ is a part of an evil cabal promoting that Trojan horse because here's some of his special effects. right, so not only do you write novels and allow us to make our own movies in our own mind that Joe would argue are superior to any visual effects, but sometimes you've been known to stray into the field of Trojan horsing us.
Absolutely.
So
I like
what's
this.
your excuse?
What was that? Counterfeit architecture?
Yes.
Yeah. My excuse is I really wanted to film that on location in the 40s, and my time machine was busted. So I had to resort to chicanery.
Oh man, I hate it when that happens.
But this is done right. I like this because it supports the story. It doesn't
Right.
take over from the story. It complements. It's not at all heavy-handed. It's got a soft touch to it, and that makes it all the more profound.
Thank you. I agree completely. It was just needed to tell the story. I couldn't tell this story without this kind of stuff because it was a period piece, and I needed to be in that other time.
Exactly. And it speaks to the resource of production. If you don't have travel expenses and whatnot, but if you have technology, you can keep costs down and the creative resources can be high. And just a little imagination and a little map plating, and this can support a story and a time and an era and a location to better fit the story. It complements and holds the story. And it's fantastic.
Yeah, I'd be the last person to say special effects are bad. They're just not a substitute for story.
And this little clip I showed folks is, if you didn't catch the year, this was 2007. So that's over a decade ago. Talk about
Ouch.
being able to create counterfeit architecture. And where do you see, like, all this technology was to entertain us, to allow us to go back in time without a time machine and experience things. But it's taken on this new element, or not a new element. It's gotten to the point where you can't tell the difference. And even when there is like 3D that's obvious 3D and science programs, they don't put recreation. They don't put a disclaimer on it at all.
I think it's just assumed you'll know.
I've had people think that these things, like they said, oh yeah, well, people have been to other planets and whatnot. I've had people say stuff like that, just kind of casually, and I didn't call them on it. But the effects have gotten so good, people kind of assume some of this is historical documentation.
That's getting into like Galaxy Quest territory.
Yeah, I was like, okay, drop that one in there. I think that film really has a depth to it on that topic, where you're like, oh my goodness, what are we doing to ourselves? So I do want to show folks the trailer for The Smiling Man, which shows how these effects came together with some story, and then we'll loop back to the cyberpunk genre. So, folks, a lot of, well, I'm going to show the clip and then I'll explain my thinking.
My name is Derek Halcyon. I'm looking for someone who seems to be missing. You are a missing persons man, aren't you, Mr. Chambers?
But if nobody had secrets, I'd be out of a job. After the war, Mom. After the things I saw. After the things I had to do. Why are you so interested in finding this guy?
I'm not Mr. Chambers. I'm interested in you finding him.
What about you, Nick? Maybe you can beat me this time.
I only play games I can win.
Oh yeah? Name one.
So who are you? What are you grinning about? What gives you the right to be so damn happy? Whoever you are, it's gonna be your downfall. In this town, anybody that happy is gonna stand out like a lighthouse. Sorry if you didn't want to hear that, but sometimes life is just full of nasty little surprises, huh?
So that was a trailer from The Smiley Man, a film you did back in 2007. What struck me about that is we're all familiar with the concepts of the gumshoe, the detective, the 1940s vibe, could be 30s, and yet you added all these effects, all this artificial special effects to create a reality, right? And when folks think of science fiction, they usually think, okay, spaceships, starships, but really you're doing something very similar. You're taking like something that's known and using technology and modifying it. And what strikes me the most about that is that when we live in the future, as we do now, we don't notice it because it's so familiar, like the gumshoe detective story. Like when I first read Cyberpunk, it seemed from this future I didn't understand, or you mentioned flying cars earlier, right? There were certain things that were going to tell us that we're in the future.
Right.
But my experience is, even though I can take out an iPad and do all this stuff, I go out my door and I feel like I'm still in the same time. Like I'm not in sci-fi future. So it's, I think there's this interesting tension where people feel like it's going to tell us when it's dystopian. But when you walk outside, it could be dystopian. You're not going to feel it. It just seems like another day.
Well, it's the old chestnut about the frog in a pot of water, that if you bring the water up slow enough, it doesn't even realize it's getting hot until it's boiled to death, because it's a slow increase. There's not a shock of change. It's so gradual, we don't noticing it happening. And you can keep that up for an entire lifetime. If you suddenly make a jump of 20, 30, 40 years, you're going to see a radical change. But having lived the inner space time in between, you don't notice the change. It's so gradual and those accumulates.
The future is in the rearview mirror.
Isn't it always?
Nice. Well, let's hear another reading from your current books. And,
okay.
Let's see if that paints a greater detail in that rearview mirror.
All right. Stacy leaned forward, speaking conspiratorially. You're all Gordian Net, aren't you? Spider smiled at Stacy. You've heard of us then? Who hasn't? I've been following your work for a long time now. We need revolutionaries like you now more than ever. Spider grinned bigger and made a dismissive motion with his hand, like he was fanning away a fly. It's a calling, really. She frowned. No, I'm serious. Somebody has to keep the corporations in check. Exactly. Lauren was the most out of place around the table in that she looked normal. Conventionally pretty and dressed in a well-tailored business suit, it would be easy for someone who didn't know her to dismiss her as a mundane, maybe a lawyer or an accountant out for a drink after work. But Spider had once watched in gobsmacked amazement as she talked a random street cop into handing her his loaded gun. The Gordian Net is just doing its civic duty, monkey wrenching, liberating information, and being just general pains in the asses. Spider grinned. And if we happen to make a pile of money in the process, what are you going to do?
Now, I remember back in the day with dial-up modems, getting on bulletin boards, meeting people, finding by meeting people that I'm now in some sketchy RV park in Hayward, and some kids show up in this like old beat-up 60s car and pile up, and everybody there is really kind of misfits, and people that you wouldn't think were necessarily tech savvy if you looked at them. They start talking in code and in server speak and how they're leveling the playing field, like in this quote that you just described. And now fast forward on, I'm older, I got a 401k, which is tied to corporate profits. I want that to grow for my retirement. And just this last week, another fine example of ransomware. where a U.S. oil refinery, I believe it was the refinery or the pipeline, is held ransom. The company actually paid the ransom to get back online. And I don't know if it was a joke or not, but it was reported that these guys said, oh, they were actually horrified by all the news of people hoarding gas and panicking. They said, oh, we were just trying to make some money. We didn't want to scare people.
Hack the planet.
Yeah. So as we get older, it's interesting which side of this alliance we're in. And I'm curious if your books talk about that.
Oh, extensively. One of the prominent themes of all cyberpunk, for the most part, is corporations being predatory against the populace and what we can and or should do about that. I mean, think about the whole Enron scandal back in the 90s. It was the corporations laughing hysterically at gouging people out of money for their electricity and power, and doing so with pure malicious intent. They all got slapped on the hand, and the corporation had to disband, but nobody really paid for that. There was never any punishment for doing that. And so there's nothing to stop the next corporation from doing exactly the same thing.
And my understanding, the person who paid for it was the California state taxpayer is still paying for Enron today. So here's the challenge. You've got this big problem. You got people not being held accountable for, and then you get the rebellion, right? Trying to hold them accountable. But now it seems like the rebellion has just become independent consultant capitalists.
Right.
Right. Rather than holding the corporation at bay for a cause, they're just holding it at bay for some extra cash.
Right. So, for a slice of the pie.
Yeah. It's their activity actually is joining in the overall system. So, at what point does the little guy get a break?
That's a good question. And cyberpunk offers mostly a wish fulfillment fantasy that somebody does something about it. I mean, it's just like Batman. You can see a lot of places where you'd want a Batman, but there is no Batman. We keep wishing for him, wishing somebody would do something, but it reflects our frustration more than path to a solution.
Yeah, and it strikes me that what we're ending up with in the cyberspace field is we're wanting Batman, and instead we got like Lex Luthor instead.
Quite literally.
So, yeah. And this story goes way back. I remember I was watching, because I watch YouTube a lot, as I said in the beginning. It was a piece in Britain where it was a peasant revolt. We're the peasants. And they like marched and gathered steam from town to town, blah, blah. And they took a break. They got tired, had some food, blah, blah. And then they made their way to London. And by then they were kind of pretty worn down. Their wives wanted to go home, and they pushed the king, who was probably 12 years old, out on a barge out in the middle of the Thames to yell at them, "I've heard you. I believe in you. Now go home." And they're like, "Oh, God, we're pretty tired from this big protest we've had." And they went home, and the monarchy stayed in power. Do you see anything in cyberpunk that gives us a hint of how we can move beyond Batman into something, I don't know, I hate to say this word, practical solution?
So something real?
Yeah. I mean, I understand it's entertainment, and you being entertaining is great. But I'm wondering, you as Mr. Author, if you have an idea in that genre of some way to convey an option.
No, not really. If I did, I wouldn't be writing books. I'd be doing it. I'd be making it happen. It's such a complex problem, and it gets more and more complex. And you're up against groups of people that are essentially all powerful now. You know, you get your Musks and your Bezoses, and they make the robber barons of the 20s look lazy and unambitious. And I don't know how you go after that.
Sorry, I actually finger
I
flub.
was
I
trying to
jumped
hit
to the
it.
next scene. Well, yeah, you're talking about Bezos and Musk, and Bezos and Musk. They're very public. You know, it's on the news. Bezos's mega yacht, everything Elon's doing. You know, but then again, he's like, he counters that easily because he just sold off all his worldly possessions to fund Starship. He sold all of his cars, houses, blah blah blah. So, and you know, so you're like, oh, this guy who's amassing cash, but at least he's doing something good for the world. But you look at, they're very public, so you can point at them. But like the Koch brothers, who are public, but not so public in the popular media, and yet
Right.
run a huge part of the United States.
Absolutely.
So, and then all the folks who just don't, you know, they understand not being public means you're freer to move about.
Well, and who's going to do something about it? You know, they've got no reason to be in the shadows. They're untouchable.
Okay, so like the old school, like Koch brothers and folks like that are a little more shadowy, and then the people who are shadowy staying there. You think like Bezos and Elon, they're like the new generation. Like, we don't have to hide.
Right. They have got so much wealth and so much power that, you know, they could dare people to come forward and do something about it, and they can't. There is no Superman. There is no Batman.
And if you put that much power into a Superman or Batman, you got to really trust that they're on your side.
Right. Well, that's then you get the Watchmen.
That's exactly where I was going. Hey, for folks who aren't familiar with science fiction as much, yeah, go watch the Watchmen. HBO, I think, was it HBO or Netflix?
Yeah.
HBO.
I think so.
A fantastic series that really touches on a lot of what we're talking about. It has without the flavor, the aesthetic flavor of cyberpunk, it's got those elements in there. The geopolitical, the American experience, all that, all wrapped up into one piece. I want to shift gears a little here and talk about the writing process. So, irregardless of what book you're going to write, I want to show you a little trailer or intro of a tool that you developed for writing, and we'll come back and talk about how that's informing and helping you write your current work.
Screenwriter Gene Fowler once said, "Writing is easy. All you do is sit staring at a blank piece of paper until the drops of blood form on your forehead." Even the best of us occasionally hit a dry patch where our ideas just won't flow and your characters stubbornly refuse to go down the path you want them to. StoryForge is the perfect tool for getting you through these times, like a big hammer for knocking ideas loose. Writers have traditionally used 3x5 index cards when outlining or brainstorming, but even these cards can stare back at you just as blankly as the pages you're trying to fill. But what if these cards were already crammed with drama-provoking ideas? StoryForge is exactly that. It's a deck of 88 cards packed with the dramatic elements that all great stories are built from. What makes this deck so powerful is that it's been carefully fine-tuned for creating works of dramatic fiction. Each card represents a turning point in the story. Plot twists, reversals of fortune, the duplicity of cunning strangers, or even divine intervention. Some cards represent mankind's most heroic strengths or tragic flaws. Others evoke the power of gods or the universe itself. The definitions printed on each card are suggestive, but are so vague you can't help but interpret them within the context of your story. But to fully appreciate the sheer power of StoryForge, you need to see it in action. So let's take it for a spin.
All right, let's take it for a spin. So with your current novels, how did Storyforge play a role?
Well, when I first started developing Storyforge, the phrase that kind of sparked the whole idea was story Legos. And I started realizing if you take dramatic structure and basic archetypes and really common tropes and break them all down to just their barest nature and put them on cards, you can randomly generate story ideas or character backgrounds or whatever, and just meant as a way to break through writer's block or stop getting in your own way. Because when you see an idea, even if you don't know, if the idea is not what you're after, you know that. And that helps you think about, well, then what do I want instead? So whenever I'm creating characters for, especially like minor characters, and I need them to have, I want them to feel real. I want them to have a backstory that informs their behavior, their dialogue, so that they have some complexity to them. I'll do a Storyforge spread and use that to kind of brainstorm, where do they come from? What makes them tick? And I'll just do that until I get a little bio of that character, and then move on to the next one.
Got it. And Storyforge not only allows you to develop the character, but also the context of how the character performs in the world.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of different spreads included with the card, with the deck that will do things like if you have a head-to-head conflict between two characters, I've got a spread called the Train Crash that sets up what brought the characters into this conflict with each other, what fuels it, what do they hope to get out of it. If you need a love story, there's a love story spread. There's a giant spread that's basically the entire hero's journey, all the stations of that. And it provides a fertilizer for thinking. It just really gets your brain juices flowing and puts you in that writing space right away.
I like it. I love this concept of not having to stare at a blank page.
Right.
Right. Really, you're staring at a blank page, which is nothing. But writing isn't based on nothing. It's based on the history of writing, the history of a particular language, and the narratives we like to tell.
Right. Well, there's a design concept that constraints give you leverage. And when you're looking at a blank page, there's no constraints. It can be anything, literally anything. And that's crippling. That's terrifying. So as soon as you start just getting little glimmers of decisions of what is happening here, what am I looking at, or what am I not looking at, it gives you something to push off of and work from.
I love that, the push off of idea.
An antagonist.
Yeah.
What's that?
An antagonist, as it were.
Yeah, well, that's one of the cards, actually, the antagonist.
And pushing off the blank page, that's very hard to push off of. Because like you said, there's no there, but as soon as you have something, like you flip one card and it says something, you can immediately say, I don't want to do that. And
right.
You made your first decision.
And then throw another card. Or even if it automatically suggests, well, what do I want? It's already done its job and you can go from there. If you're still lost, keep throwing cards till something goes, yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, I love that aspect too. It's not just getting ideas for my novel, say, but also you may have an inherent sense of what you're wanting to do, but you don't have the language yet. So the cards can help you find the words that describe what you're wanting to do.
Or you could be in your subconscious and you need to just pull it out into the conscious mind.
Have you ever automatic written?
No, I've tried and nothing happened.
What? Your grandpappy ghost spirit just didn't want to channel, huh?
Well, I'm such a writer that as soon as I have a writing implement in my hand, the process brain kicks in. So I can't turn off and let something happen without that.
Okay, I got it. So, and so what? How would you distinguish the difference between I am a writer and I have process versus I put my hands on the keyboards and this stuff is just coming out?
That's stream of consciousness, which it's just a separate skill. And I'm not saying that one's valuable and one's not. I'm just saying that they use a different part of the brain.
Got it. Okay. And
I'm personally not able to do one.
The reason why I throw that out there is, in the music world that I'm in, and certainly when I talk with writers, I hear some folks who want to be writers and they're struggling with this concept that you've put out there, and they think they have to stare at the blank page and get ideas and get this unconscious flow going. And I think one of the things you bring to that conversation is actually you don't have to suffer that whole drama. You can actually just cut to the chase.
Well, think about the cut up method that Bowie and Eno were using, where you write lyrics, chop them up, and put them in a bag, shake it, and dump them out, and rearrange them, and see what you get. It's kind of the same thing. It's take something outside of yourself to move your writing into a place you did not consciously go.
Oh, okay. Okay. So the sound for sorry, I do a lot of music stuff. The Story Forge, and I use a program called SoundForge. The Story Forge deck, which is available on Amazon, yes?
Yes.
All right, awesome. Helps you kind of tap in a way, but in a more, it sounds like in a more coherent way than the cut up method, which can end up creating some interesting stuff, but also a lot of garbage.
There's still a lot of room for interpretation in the way the definitions of each card are worded. They're not, super specific. They're more trying to get at the shape of an idea rather than the idea itself, so that it is still up to you to dial in that exact meaning. It's not supposed to take the place of creating your story. It's just supposed to show you possibilities.
So I can write in any genre of literature using this system.
Yeah, now it's definitely geared for dramatic fiction. But I mean, you could use it for plays just as easily. You could use it for creating characters for role-playing games. I think I said that in the video. Yeah, it's not genre specific. I've had people ask me for genre specific cards, and I resist that because genre conventions aren't the story, they're the dressing. The story should be universal human truths. Got
it. Okay, that makes sense to me. And I'm dating myself by saying this. It's not for Chilton manuals. Everybody remember Chilton manuals for cars? You'd get like a manual for your extra manual. Anyhow, that would be for the story about how you worked your way through a car repair with the Chilton manual, right? You'd have the conflict. Right. The bolt is broken, and now you have to rework it. That was my my attempt at humor today. Well, I'm going to take a brief break, and we're going to be right back with BJ West, who is the author of 3 new cyberpunk novels. Check them out on Amazon, and has also created Story Forge, a deck of cards that helps you break the ice so that you can start writing that novel that you've always been wanting to. Hey, everybody, this is your Mystic Moment of the week. It is Write Your Story. If you've been wanting to write a story, but you haven't known where to start, BJ has laid out very clearly in this interview how there are tools to get you up and rolling. I'm a fan of a series of novels that don't sell big. And I know the guy down in LA, and he uses Lulu for single prints. So you write your story on the computer, you upload your computer file, Word, PDF, And if nobody orders it, great, you're not out any money. But if people order it, boom, the machinery prints out a single book, wraps it, sends it to you door to door. So you don't have to make this capital investment and have a stack of books in the corner in your home waiting for someone to get into your novel. You can actually do these one-off runs. So there's really nothing today in the 21st century stopping you from writing and distributing a book cheaply and easily. So write your story. Heck, your life is your story. Every day when you wake up, you get to write the next chapter of your story. Go out there and write that. And if you want to share that with others beyond social media posts and actually put it in tangible paper, the technology is available. So I challenge you this week to do something where you write your story, whether you choose to do something differently that day, you choose to let people know what you did that day, or to actually write a novel. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are having a writer week this week. I know we've been doing a lot of music, but I really wanted to break it out, make sure that we're still talking about all of the arts, because whether you're writing a song, even if it's instrumental, or a novel, whether or not you're doing a piece of art, you're creating a conversation. And that's what the show is all about, is having that conversation and opening up opportunities in our lives. We're going to stick around. We're going to have an after party with BJ and continue to dig into his new novels and what that really means in reflection to our reality today. All right, BJ, you are in the after party. And I decided I found some nice cyberpunk footer, especially for your episode. Only your episode will have the cyberpunk city down below. The
Nice.
after party, we kind of loosen up. You know, the beginning is like formal interview. Where'd you grow up? What was your child? Oh, that's right. We didn't do any of that. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in the Bay Area pretty much. Little town called Crockett and then Benicia. So all around the East Bay, and lived for many years in San Jose and many years in San Francisco. So I'm a Bay Area boy.
And Crockett, wow. I once met a girl from Crockett. This sounds like I'm setting up a joke. And I was supposed to meet some of her and her friends and there's like the one little bar, whatnot, and you're on the freeway, and you look down from the freeway, and there's this thing down there. There's this little town hidden away. And I got off the freeway, went down there. I must have missed them at the bar or whatnot. Never happened. Never saw them again. But that was, I've been to Crockett.
The entire town's pretty much a support system for CNH Sugar.
Yes, as you're about to go by the bridge, you just see this big sugar factory sign. And yeah, I didn't know it was down there. And you grew up in Crockett.
Yeah, my family has deep ties to CNH. My grandfather worked there. My dad worked there most of his adult life, and even I worked a summer there.
Wow, I had no idea.
Very surreal.
Talk about focused product. What do you do at your company? We make sugar.
That's it.
We make sugar. That's what we do. So, how did corn syrup mess with that? So the Nixon administration passed all these laws and rules and programs to massively produce corn because they wanted to end hunger in America. So we now have this huge surplus of yellow corn in the country. And by the 80s, they were like, it was growing out of our ears, literally. And so it was like, well, what could we do with this stuff? We could make sweetener out of it, corn syrup. And thus the Coca-Cola New Coke battle began. How did that impact the sugar world?
I'm sure it cut into it, but there's another aspect to it, and that sugar cane largely grows in other countries, except for Hawaii. So, we were dependent on other countries for the raw materials to make sugar. So what can you grow in the United States? So we don't have to deal with that. You get beets, sugar beets, and corn. And it's largely a trying to break the supply chain to other countries.
Okay. So that brought the raw materials product. Is CNH in corn syrup? I imagine you get a company that big, they're going to be in everything to do with sweeteners.
I don't believe so. I mean, it's been many, many, many years since I had anything to do with CNH, but they were pure sugar, and that was it. You know, they make brown sugar, powdered sugar, all the sugars, but no other products at all, as far as I know.
Wow. Now I'm intrigued. I want to totally Wikipedia them and find out, you know, if they are pure sugar. Anyhow, because there's not too many companies that are like, you know, purely focused on a product like that.
Yeah, well, they're old. That the factory was built in the 20s.
Mm.
And a lot of it, when I was there, it still looked like it.
Didn't it shut down briefly and then open up again of late?
I know they did. I think in the early 90s, when they switched over from using boilers to generate their power and hot water to cogeneration.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So more of a process technology change than industry change around sugar. So
yeah, but it was foundational enough. They had to shut it completely down to replace that underlying technology.
Wow. Okay. Do you think that CNH sugar had an influence on your attraction to the kind of 30s gumshoe vibe?
No, that was all film noir movies.
Okay, it wasn't like I worked at the factory one summer and like the boss came down. He was the great grandson. He still had the fedora on, or
no.
All right. And did it influence you in science fiction, or was that again from entertainment?
Actually, it kind of has. So much sci-fi is based on like large industrial factories. Think about Alien, how the look of that is all big, dirty machines grinding away. And I got to actually experience that environment firsthand. I also got to ride on the man lifts, which are basically a vertical conveyor belt with a step and a handle every 8 feet. Okay. And you go to a hole in the floor, and when that step comes up through, you just step onto it, and it takes you up as much as 9 floors of open space. It's thrilling, terrifying, horribly unsafe, and if it wasn't grandfathered in from the 30s, would never be allowed. But I've used man lifts in several spacecraft in my stories because they make sense in low gravity.
But you just got this conveyor belt you grab onto, and it takes you through at high speed.
It's medium speed.
Okay, fair enough. I suppose
that's enough that it's scary.
Supposing in zero gravity, you would not want to build up a high speed at any point.
No. You'd have to get good at jumping off and landing on the ceiling.
Yeah, maybe breaking a few bones in the process. You got to get the deceleration. So this is like an endless belt, right? This is kind of what I'm mentioning. Like it didn't have a deceleration.
Groups over, comes down the other side.
So when do you get off?
Before that.
Okay. Okay. Wow. Jeez. I talk to folks. I do a lot of band consulting, and it's younger folks, and they're kind of be like, things are not getting better. Things are not getting better. And then I hear a story like this. I'm like, things have gotten better.
If you look backwards, you see things have gotten so much better.
Yes. I was just thinking during my lifetime, all the things that have been improved in standard living and justice and opportunity, it's just incredible.
Yeah.
How much that has expanded in our lifetime.
And there's people who resent it.
Oh, yes. Yes, they do.
It's funny. People resent it because something about having opportunity, it gives you responsibility of sorts. When you have tools, you have less of an excuse, and you have more of responsibility and accountability through opportunity. It's a two-edged sword in a way, but if you have to meet the challenge, that opportunity, even as presented as responsibility and accountability, can be a great and wonderful thing.
Definitely.
You just can't be your own worst enemy. As for Crockett, I've been there several times. I have fond memories of Crockett. This wonderful, this town, timeless in its own way, built on the precipice, this hill right up against the straits, and much of it under almost a subterranean quality to it, because much of it is under the freeway overpasses and over the Carquinez Bridge. It has a very subterranean feel, and much of the sun is blocked out by the infrastructure overhead.
Yeah, definitely. I lived way up on the top of the hills, so I had kind of an aerial view of the whole thing. It was even above the level of the freeway, but there's not much of town that is.
A little small town feel, a little Brazil feel to it.
Oh, very much. It feels like the town that time forgot.
Totally. That's exactly the description I had. I forgot. Actually, I have a friend who has a house in Crockett on the hill that faces the strait. So he has a view of the water. The freeway's behind him. Hey, Mike Dempsey, if you're out there watching. And yeah, it is one of those little towns that you've gone everywhere around there and you don't know that there's something else there.
It's really easy to miss. If you're on the freeway, it's an exit and then it's gone.
I have fond memories of the Nantucket restaurant, which is no longer there. It was right up against the waterfront, a very Oliver Twist waterfront, kind of a type of semi-shambles, boats half sunken and everything. Very dystopian, very maritime, and just wonderful, not to mention the views of everything.
I remember Nantucket.
I think we could say that, I lost it. I was going to say something clever about Crockett, and I got distracted and was texting people. See, attention deficit disorder. It's not just a thing. It's now normal. It's a little place. Oh, that was it. It was Crockett. It's the East Bay's land.
Port Costa?
No, like a land that time forgot kind of thing.
And Port Costa is the land that Crockett forgot.
Well, today I got in the car. I got inspired. I said, I want to go explore so much more of Washington. Oh, I want to get to near the Pacific. I've been near the Pacific in a year and a half. I don't care that's going to take me 2 hours to get there. And so I went out and like, this little town of Aberdeen's out there. It's probably like, a coastal Pacifica kind of town. No, it is the land that time forgot. You're out there going, wow, we feel grateful for our lives. We feel so grateful. So they do exist. There's in the East Bay, there's another one. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's in a canyon. You're in Oakland, and it's suburbia, rich people hills. And then you look over the other side of the hills, and it's all grasslands, dry grasslands, going out to Mount Diablo. But if you go down this one road, you end up in a redwood fern forest where there's a town with a single school in it. Canyon. That's the place. It's like total, like you expect a dinosaur to come out of nowhere. Land that time forgot. So they happen. These little towns, these out of way places that we don't think about necessarily in our day-to-day lives, but they exist. So when did you first go from Crockett Living, a history of families that worked for one company, into the wider world? When did you leave that hamlet?
We left Crockett when I was still in grade school. And I left Benicia pretty much when I started college.
Okay. And where did you go to college?
San Jose State,
Oh,
which is how I ended up meeting you and all the rest of the Biohazard crew.
I don't remember. I have no memory of you at San Jose State.
I was an industrial design major.
Okay, you in the art department?
Yeah.
That's wild because I remember the first time meeting you being at Biohazard. And maybe you worked for this artificial speech company that Mike Jennings worked at?
No. No, I worked at Kinko's.
That's right. You worked at Kinko's and you're doing, and then Peter Stubbs also worked at a copy shop and he was making like art with the copies and okay. So we both were there at the same time. I was in the psychology department, which was this cinder block building with chairs that looked like they were from elementary school that they stole. And then I was moonlighting in the music department, but that led me to actually going into the art department for my master's in multimedia. And that's before then, my buddy Kadar, he bought me my first modem. You know, I had a little Mac, that was it. A professor of mine said, buy this Mac, it'll change your life. And I never thought I was going to end up in the art department, but there I was, and I didn't realize. So
Tiny world.
Tiny world. So you were in the art department there, and but you got out way before I got out.
Yeah, I finished in 92.
Okay.
Roughly.
I finished my master's in the art department in 94. But it makes sense that we were both downtown San Jose around the Club FX, around Biohazard, which was a house that sort of had alternative parties. It was in a kind of semi-abandoned area. Across the road was a train station, like train tracks, industrial space. There were Bradley tanks stacked in a warehouse over there. So in some ways, downtown San Jose at that time had a cyberpunk feel.
Very much so. Kind of the remains of a once great city before it was rejuvenated.
Yeah, totally. And you were part of the Friday firefights, I think is what it got dubbed.
Yep. Playing laser tag in the Camera 3 parking garage.
Yes. I will say I have a claim to fame on that situation, which was Mike Jennings. He was talking about doing it, and my mother, who's watching here today, she watches all my episodes. She's a worrier. I think, Mom, I can say that. You're a worrier. So she instilled me a certain amount of worry. And I had been a part of a science fiction fan club scene. Was it Legion of Rassilon? That was it. Doctor Who fan club. And we had these guns before laser tag that shot like rubber bullets. Gently.
Yeah.
And we'd run around doing this in neighborhoods and stuff. And eventually, at some point, someone called the police. And that was like, that left an impression. So when Mike proposed this laser tag thing, I'm like, Mike, you need to call the police. You need to tell them that we're going to be out and about. I do not want to randomly get shot.
I have a follow-up story. I did not know that Mike was calling the police and letting him know we were having these games in the parking garage. And one week he had, I don't know if he was sick or if he had another obligation. He left it to me to organize the game. I had no idea he was calling the cops. So I just did it. And yes, like you said, somebody calls the cops. Suddenly we are raided on all three sides of the parking garage, and they herd us all up to the top. First yell at us very sternly, and then spend about a half an hour playing with our gear.
Now, the story I've been told, I've missed that story, because the story I was told was he called, because I would bug him about shit like this, right? Because he just liked doing stuff. And so he called and he said he told them, and the gal said, "Oh, do you have the permission of the property owner?" And he just said, being Mike, he just said, "Yes." So he said they typed it into the computer on a document, something. And
never checked.
And that was it. They believed it. So at some point, an officer showed up at one of them, and he went up to the guy and chatted with them. And the guy's like, "Yeah, I hear you guys have permission to play up here, and da, da, da. That's amazing." And that's the story Mike tells. So I didn't know. I must have not been there the night that they herded you guys to the top floor of the parking garage.
Well, and neither was Mike.
Oh, great! You're like, I'm not the guy who called. I see.
Yeah, so nobody called.
Happy birthday, Beach. It's a gift.
Yeah, it was an eye opener.
So once they realized you were cool, and these are toys, and you're just some folks playing game, they were like just down with the equipment, or?
Yeah, they just wanted to check it out and try it out and see what kind of range it had. They spent about a good half hour just hanging out with us, and then told us to go home, of course.
By the way, call it
yeah,
night.
You're done here.
Okay, I didn't know about this. I knew that at some point it stopped, but between running around between San Jose State and different scenes, hanging out with Joe at the Renaissance Fair, I was all over the place.
Yeah.
So you're part of San Jose State. You're part of the Club FX scene. What were some of your other haunts?
Let's see. At the time, I went to all the clubs on First Street, Cactus Club, what was it, Atlas,
Oasis?
And then just yes, back when they still had the pool, even, which was very cool.
Talk about again technology and dystopian. Here you are,
yeah,
you're dancing on plexiglass over a pool,
which you can see,
which had water in it.
And it was lit.
And it was lit, which meant electricity plus water plus plexiglass and people jumping up and down.
Right. I'm just wondering, when's it going to go? When's that plastic going to give?
So you've had your stories have these backgrounds, right? It's not like you're just a writer. I don't know. Okay, I'm going to diss suburbia here. In some little cozy little suburban house writing these stories, you lived some of this.
Yeah. And especially if you know the whole 90s club scene in San Jose, that's really obvious in my books. I mean, there are specific locations I throw out just as background that if you know is going to be a little extra significant. If you don't know, it doesn't matter. It's just a place.
Nice. I love when an author gives more depth. Like back in the DVD time, right? Easter eggs. We click 5 times this way and unlock this little bit or tidbit, but also just where the writer gives an opportunity for the reader who's in the know to enjoy it at a deeper level.
Well, now that we've got the internet, there's no reason not to. I mean, if somebody writes about a place they've never been to, in the past, you'd say, okay, well, they've never been there and it doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect the story. But now we have like Google Street View. When I say a character lives in a town, I walk the route virtually. I know they turned on this corner and that corner to get from here to here, and then they would see this thing on the left. So I'm able to test drive the locale before I write about it. So when I write about it, it has authority. It has verisimilitude.
I had no idea. Like you're actually using Google Maps to be in the place.
Yeah.
I've done that in Whitby, England. Virtually, the ruins of an abbey. I have walked the grounds of the ruins of the abbey in Whitby, England via Google Maps. I mean, as though strolling the freshly green grass in and out of the doorways of this abandoned ruin. It's the famous ruin of an abbey atop the hill of Whitby. And it's as though you're there. You can even walk the town of Whitby because of Google Maps. It's uncanny. And so to write about it, you're not being fraudulent because in a way you've been there. You've learned as much as you need to know.
Without dropping $1,500 on a plane ticket.
Indeed.
And you probably know more about it via these new platforms than going there at this point.
Yeah. I mean, depending on how much you want to research, because yeah, you can go to a place and you get the little pamphlet they give you as you walk in the door, but you're not going to hit the library and research it unless it's, like your particular interest. But this way you can do that for even the tiniest burg.
So earlier we were talking about virtual reality, and it strikes me this is actually virtual reality. It's not the way we.
Yeah, it's just not full immersion.
Yeah, but you say, oh, okay, I feel like I've gone to a place because I've walked the grounds. I know the street. I know that little shop that's on the corner. I might even know the guy who runs the shop. I know the whole history through Wikipedia. So Google plus Wikipedia, you create an awareness of all sorts of places in the world that is a step beyond watching a documentary on a TV show.
Well, and unless it's, relevant to the plot, you may not want to make a big deal about it. It's just that, you have to paint a picture in the reader's mind of a place. It might as well be informed.
Make it real. I will note there are limitations to Google Maps, as we found today, as we were going out to the coast and we were getting close. All of a sudden, I saw two very big coolant towers, the type you have on nuclear energy generators, just sticking out of a mountain. And Alex jumped on her phone to see what it was, and it was just the whole area was blank.
That's spooky.
We're used to being able to see like nuclear tests in North Korea via Google and whatnot, and to see something in the United States, it's just blank. It makes you like, oh. Okay.
Nothing to see here. Nothing to see.
Yeah. So someone told someone not to put that on the map, but it's kind of a dead giveaway when you have two like multi-hundred feet in the air coolant towers. I'm just saying.
Just a little bit.
I'm saying.
Not subtle.
Yeah, not subtle at all. So I'm going to show another little clip here on, which is an example of your story writing, and then I'd love to get another reading from your book.
Okay.
The entertainment industry is in trouble. A mysterious plague is threatening the livelihood of the thousands of people we depend on to create the shows that we all enjoy on a daily basis. It's a disease that has no name, but its devastating effects are obvious to anyone who watches today's movies and TV programs with a trained eye. Through mechanisms not yet understood by science, this terrible affliction seems to target the very skills that today's behind-the-lens talent rely upon to do their job. In camera operators, it manifests itself as a decline of upper body strength and hands that shake so badly that it becomes completely impossible to hold a camera steady.
Why not just use a tripod? Ah!
In editors, the disease makes it impossible for them to focus on any single shot for more than a few seconds. To make matters even worse, they are completely unable to resist subjecting even these brief images to an onslaught of gratuitous video effects and uncalled for graphic overlays. The results are horrifying. Overpresented movies and TV shows that are so spasmodic and frenetic they are difficult to watch. Amateurish streams of blurry off-center images flickering by so fast that the audience can barely register them. And from all indications, the problem is only getting worse. Left unchecked, the production values and the entertainment we all depend on will devolve to a level that they may as well be made by children. Children with Parkinson's disease and ADD. But it doesn't have to be this way. With your help, we can work towards putting an end to this two-headed beast. A cure is possible, and once it is found, the men and women who create the entertainment we need so desperately can be rehabilitated. Please give generously, before we have no choice but to look away.
So this struck me as, let's see, a friend of mine, Kevin McGinnis, I was over at his place. This has got to be like a decade ago now. And his buddy and him were watching this show, and I literally was like am I drunk? I mean, what's going on here? I couldn't watch the show. Like, they really were into it. I'm like, you understand what they're saying? Like, the images and the cuts and the script was so fast and so disjointed. I could not make any coherent sense of what I was watching. It was like a newsroom show or something. So when I saw this clip on YouTube, I'm like, he understands. So how do you find a balance in your books of slowing things down, I'm assuming, in a novelized form, and yet still appealing to an audience that's expecting, rapid fire material?
You kind of give them both simultaneously. Since in a book, the time is completely illusory, it's subjective. So you can say something's happening very quickly and spell it out as if it were in slow motion. Give them all the detail, make it really dense. But as far as words on the page go, it can be longer. It can be less rushed. But still, because in the story itself, the time is going very quickly, it gives you that breathless feeling anyway.
Got it. Joe, what do you think?
Sounds like a time-honored trick with the writing is expository data that's been revealed within the dialogue. So you can kill two birds with one stone at 2 layers, and it makes the story hurry on without being rushed. It's very efficient, and at the same time, nothing is rushed, nothing is left behind. You don't have to play catch up with the story, but the story doesn't drag you along as the reader. You're not bored. Things keep flowing, but you're able to keep up. That's just one idea. Part of the storyline is revealed. Ingredients of the story are revealed through the dialogue. It's they're using the dialogue for exposition.
Absolutely. As long as you don't develop Obi-Wan syndrome, where the story grinds to a halt while everybody sits down and has a long backstory conversation.
The whole, you're watching this and I'm going to explain to you what you should be seeing.
Right.
Backstories and whatnot. I mean, Tolkien can do that, but not everyone can.
Right. It's hard to pull off without being clunky.
Are you going to do a comic book series of these novels? And if so, how would you deal with this level of complexity into simplified bubbles?
Well, I'm not going to do a comic book adaptation of the books. If somebody wanted to, I would be all for that.
You heard it, folks.
It would probably,
if you're a comic
I'm
book
sure it would
writer,
have to be streamlined. You'd have to sacrifice some level of detail because it would be very difficult to get it all in there. Although also a lot of stuff that I'm describing in words in the book, you could work into the visuals of the art. So you don't have to take time to paint that detail. It's just there.
Good point. All the descriptive elements. As I'm not a novel writer, never tried. It strikes me that a lot of what you have to do is you have to sort of set up the canvas, imagine and put down the paint. Like you have to build the whole thing up for it to work. How do you,
right?
Outside of using your cards, how do you put those elements together, or like what ratio? Because I could see you put too much sugar in the coffee and it stops being coffee.
Right. A lot of it's intuitive. A lot of it is just writing it out and then go, nope, that's too slow. It's too obsessive about what you're talking about. Take some of it out. Or it could be, no, the pacing on this is fine. You can actually go a little further, get richer. If anything, because I have a lot of background in screenwriting, not professional, just having studied it and done it a lot. I tend to gloss over a lot of what do you actually see? What is your character seeing around them? And I have to do a second pass to go back and put all that kind of detail in to flesh out the world. First I'm just getting the action, the dialogue, the motion, blocking out the scene and the mechanics of driving the plot forward. And then I've got to go back and set dress it.
So it's exactly like working with green screen. You've created the character, the dialogue, it's all happening on the green screen, and basically you have to then go fill in the matte.
Right, exactly.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I'm just thinking back to whenever I was forced to read Grapes of Wrath in school, and we read his diary as we read the book, and it read something like, Day 1, sharpened pencils. Day 2, wrote word, erased it. It sounds like writing doesn't have to be that, but a lot of people think, that's the classic model of the writer. And if you don't have that or can't go down that route, you can't do it. What would be your advice to folks who just wanted to start something? They don't have your cards. They're just hearing this conversation, but they've always wanted to write something. Where would they start?
I would say start by writing it bad. It doesn't matter when you do your first draft, whether it's good. It doesn't matter whether it works. It doesn't matter if it's what you want. Throw mud at the wall. Just splash it in your world that you're creating, and just don't make it painful to do. Have fun with it. Just go nuts. And then you've got all the time in the world to rewrite and make it good and make it work.
What ratio would you say you put into writing versus editing?
I'd say about 10% writing, 90% editing, and rewriting. That's where the magic happens.
Write with your heart, edit with your head.
Yes. Yes. And hopefully without losing your heart in the process.
Oops, we cut the heart out. Have you had that happen?
I've had scenes that were suddenly dry. Yeah. It's like, this was exciting when I wrote it the first time. Now it's like a tech manual. Let's go put the emotion back in.
Dave Grohl, the musician Dave Grohl, would agree with you wholeheartedly about not being afraid to suck.
You have to.
Yes, you have to go and not be afraid to suck and almost, revel in it, embrace it, and just practice. Suddenly you have a garage band called Nirvana.
Right. Well, and being obsessed about it being good when you're starting out can stop you from doing it at all, and makes it a drudge. It's, if you're trying to write it perfect in one pass, it's just going to be such a slog that you're not going to want to ever do it again.
Exactly. Writing or music. Can you imagine if Lou Reed was so obsessed with being as perfect as Pavarotti, he would have never been Lou Reed. But he forgot all about it, and he came up with Velvet Underground. And Lou Reed, he sings at 1/8 of an octave, but his songs and his music are famous and inspirational.
Absolutely. And they gave us All Tomorrow's Parties, which ends up being a William Gibson book.
Thank you. I love that song.
It is. It's really good.
When I was at San Jose State in the art department, I think, did it happen earlier? Now that I'm thinking, it might have happened earlier. I think Mike might have played me the first album, but I didn't really get into it until a little later. And it seemed like everybody in art school had the Velvet Underground albums. So even though they never sold in their day, in their time, here we are, 30, 40, half a century has gone by, and we're talking about them.
Yeah.
And if you ask them in 1971, if you ask Lou Reed about Velvet Underground, he goes, well, that was a waste of 8 years of my life. Right? It never became anything. It was a total failure. And yet they're still an influence on the arts today. So don't worry about if you're a masterpiece in your time, if you want to write, if you have the creative force in you, do something.
Yep, you just got to start.
My favorite Velvet Underground song of all time is After Hours, and it is sung horrible. Its timing is horrible. And when I went and saw REM on a tour, they closed that whole tour with that song.
Perfect.
Each night they would close with that song. And here's a song that, again, someone wrote, someone performed, someone recorded, and it was terrible by all sorts of standards. But there's something in it, you know, some little charm that people have been covering that song for decades. So it's almost like you can't judge what the impact of your work is. You just got to do it.
And even thinking about that can get in the way.
So how do you, I mean, we talked again about StoryForge. We talked about it, but what are some of your other techniques for getting yourself out of the way?
One of the big ones is if I'm locked up on a scene, skip it. Write the next scene. Write the next scene, you know what happens. And the other one is stop before you're finished with what you've currently got in your head. So you leave yourself that little handle when you come back on the next writing session, you remember where you were and you pick up on that handle and continue. Where if you completely finish a thought cold, you have to start with something new next time and it's almost the blank page all over again.
That's a great concept, Beej. I had never thought about it because I know when I do my own lyric writing, I try to squeeze as much out of the mental lemon as I can. And sometimes it's hard to come back to it. Like I don't know how to get back into the piece, what my entry point is. I like that idea. Stop, leave the sort of tail that you can hold on to.
Right. So you remember where you were and it puts you right back into that energy space.
Ah, yes. I have a song I've kicked around. I was driving the car at the time. It all came up out of my mouth. And I said, oh, I'm going to write this down. But I just couldn't find another into it. I couldn't find the energy and the space again. So I abandoned it. Do you find that sometimes you're driving and all of a sudden you get a story part? And how do you retain that and make sure that can get purposed?
That's really hard. I have actually spent, I used to have a really long commute before COVID. I spent 2.5 hours in the morning and 2.5 hours in the evening getting to and from work. And if I had a great idea, I would kind of repeat it over and over in my head like a mantra for as long as I could until I was confident, okay, I've now got a grip on this. I'm not going to lose it. Because yeah, it's really easy once you start doing something else for that idea to just be gone. If you don't have a chance to write down a note or something to remind yourself. So I just kind of repetition. Okay, now it's firm.
Got it. Okay. I picked up this habit of recording when I could on my iPhone, but I don't have the habit of going back to my iPhone and listening.
I'm a
it's strange.
notes guy.
Like, oh, I got to get this down. It's so important, but I never go back. Yeah. So you don't record, walk around like with a pocket recorder, recording your ideas.
No, I do lots of Post-it notes.
Okay.
Just like 5 words that will be shorthand for what I was thinking about. And every now and then I go back to those Post-it notes and it's like, I have no idea what I was talking about. That one's gone.
Mango, peach, ISDN.
Yeah.
What?
Nope.
But you get through it.
404, idea not found.
And on a practical level, with all this stuff you're creating, how do you actually get it into a physical form and out to people?
Well, luckily I have a publisher who does that for me. I'm with Xenophile Books. The owner is an old friend of mine from high school, and also we've written some novels together, John Mabry. He's awesome, and he's my publisher. So he takes care of all the typesetting and graphics and all that, and then getting it into bookstores and on Amazon.
Cool. Very cool. That's a great, it's great to have those connections in the pipeline.
Yeah, very much so.
If you didn't have that in with someone that you knew, what would you do?
Well, then I do the self-publishing like you were talking about earlier, where you sign up with Amazon. They've got a program where you can just publish your own books on a print-on-demand basis. So anybody has this capability now to get the book out there. It doesn't mean it's going to be professionally polished, and it doesn't mean that anybody's going to know it exists. So that becomes the burden for the self-publisher.
Got it. And certainly if you're self-publishing one-off books, you're not placing them in bookstores, whatever those are.
Right.
I was thinking, wow, bookstores were struggling, and then COVID, yeah, bookstores.
Yeah, I remember bookstores.
I hadn't even thought about the impact COVID had on bookstores, because again, I'm more in the music side of the business, so we're always talking about how's the impact of live shows, what's the impact of connecting with fans, etc. But the hanging out at the coffee shop and reading books is like, a big part of it.
You might as well be talking about the Jazz Age or Paris in the 50s.
Now you got me feeling old.
I do miss it though. I desperately miss the old cafe culture. It was lovely.
There was a wonderful cafe on South First Street, not far from FX. Caleb and I would go there from time to time. It was on South, it's no longer there, but it was a wonderful place. And I forget the name of it. It wasn't far from, it was South First, very close to San Salvador.
I wonder if that was Howard's place.
Howard's place?
We've got a friend, Howard Busick, who had a cafe on First back in the day. I'm trying to remember what it was called.
I don't remember.
Oh, I'm ashamed.
The west side of First Avenue, the west side of South First.
West side?
Yeah.
I thought his was on the east side across from Cactus Club.
Yes, it was just past the billiards place.
Oh yeah, the billiards place.
I could say almost catty corner from where FX was.
Yeah, none of this stuff exists anymore.
I was living in San Jose before I moved to Washington, and I was going downtown supporting the Balanced Breakfast music community events and stuff like that. So I actually got to know the new downtown. There's stuff down there now, and there's a speakeasy underground that was like really kind of fancy cocktail speakeasy.
Single barrel, yeah.
Yeah. So downtown has grown the next level. It isn't a San Francisco or Oakland or whatever, but there is like some nice microbrewery and stuff like that.
There's a Courtyard Street for the nightlife there. There was, at least pre-COVID, it's probably coming back, hopefully. Post Street was a one-lane, one-way street. It was 2 blocks long. They had a huge 2-story gay nightclub. They had a couple of bars that were with a little outdoor patio, really cozy and exclusive in the back. And some of the restaurants, when they closed, they brought tables out in the front of the doors and they served to passing strollers. There was bacon wrapped hot dogs, Mexican food, Chinese food, and you could stroll up and down the place. It was very open, sociable, no cars, and just pedestrians until 2 in the morning. It was a great place to hang out outside. It's in a deep alleyway that's kind of sheltered by the canyon of buildings, but it was a wonderful little place, a wonderful little sheltered cove of social nightlife.
Yeah, that place is well, pre-COVID when I was in San Jose, that's still a hopping little spot because it has that San Francisco out of the way feel, which most of San Jose doesn't.
Yeah, that
so
sounds cool.
Yeah, it's like almost like a musical sound, like a theatrical soundstage.
And I've been finding stuff up here before COVID shut down pretty quickly. I connected with a community of musicians, music software, the punk scene, art scene, whatnot, and we started hosting events once a month at Substation here in Seattle. So I got to know a lot of people up here and different like hideaway cool spots. But obviously that only lasted about 4 months before everything shut down, and it's been over a year. The Goth Industrial Club up here is called the Mercury, and some random trivia point. I just got my membership card to the Mercury this week. So dialing this back, we first moved to Washington. Like, okay, where's the Goth Club? Where's our Cat Club equivalent? And we found the Mercury. Became members, signed up, went the first night. My wife got her card the next week. So that's over a year ago. I got my card. Now I can go. And, she gets her second injection on Tuesday. So in 2 weeks after that, we could actually go dancing, maybe?
Wow. What a concept. I don't know if I remember how to people.
It's a good question. I mean, we just being in the car, going out to the coast, we were playing the VNV Nation channel, which is her favorite, and I'm like, honey, we haven't listened to like dance goth industrial in so long. Because we haven't driven more than 5 minutes for so long. So we don't even know how to car, let alone people. It's definitely fascinating what the next phase in coming out of this stuff is going to be. Well, having said all that, I'm going to put a pin in that one, like the story, and perhaps we'll continue the story with another interview at a later time when the next batch of books comes out. We'd love to have you back on the show. On your final thoughts on what is that future look like? And then Joe, you get your final wrap-up thought. I wasn't able to add your slide this week, so we'll have BJ go, and you just rapid fire, and then we'll wrap up.
Wow, that's a big question and a scary question. I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but the future is not bright. From the way I see it, we are in for some very rough times ahead. And that's actually where my next book is going. It's kind of a modern version of When Worlds Collide, except it's more like When Worlds Melt Down.
All right. Well, we'll have you on the show to present that. Actually, before Joe goes, I know I'm going into overtime, Beej, but would you be willing to read another clip from your book before we go?
Okay, sure. Let's see. All right, here we go. Spider considered taking over the drones, swatting them out of the air like mosquitoes, but again chose to remain discreet. Let them look for now. Then all the thoughts of the drones and their operator were slapped out of Spider's head as a swirl of ember-like particles formed in the air about 3 feet in front of him, swarming together and melting into each other, forming a woman. He recognized her instantly. It was his angel, the mysterious woman he had seen so many times when he was going through treatment at Our Lady of Snows. She held up a hand. "Hello, Spider." Her voice was soft and musical. Spider noticed that her bare feet were suspended an inch or so off the concrete of the sidewalk and that she cast no shadow. Otherwise, her avatar was easily the most lifelike he'd ever seen, especially considering it was being pushed onto his AR layer without permission. Spider looked around. Going by the reactions of the refugees bustling around him, he was the only one seeing her. Hello. He didn't return the wave, still aware that he was being watched. I've seen you before. You have. I've been watching you closely for some time now. Yeah? Why is that? Because you saved my life. His mind reeled at the kind of hardware it would take to generate this kind of detail he was seeing, every strand of golden hair drifting around her face, every fold of her gown billowing in some unfelt breeze, the glow of sunshine on her alabaster skin, and all in real time, fully interactive 3D space. He checked the diagnostics on his splice. Not only did it show no signs of being hacked, it didn't even register her presence. He began to feel afraid. Somebody with that much power could probably kill him by thinking about him too hard. He felt his mouth go dry, unsure of what to say to her, being very careful not to offend her. Happy to help, whatever I did. I thought I should finally introduce myself. I'm St. Jude.
Awesome. Thank you for that, BJ. It's
You're
great
welcome.
connecting with you. Stay online on Zoom. We'll wrap up the show, and then we'll have a little post-show chat. You got time for that?
Okay. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Joe, take the floor. Mr. Price, are you out there?
Yes, the rumors are true. I am here.
All right, you get the last word, and then we'll wrap up this week's episode.
Yes, I continue to be heartfelt by the crossover of genres, by like-minded individuals, people who are inspired by these genres, the resources, cyberpunk, the internet, electronic music, nightlife, nightclubs, goth industrial music, science fiction, computer technology. All of this is a Venn diagram that is heavily overlapping, much to our collective amazement and inspiration. And we should use this to inspire. This is the resources that we have to be creative, to be productive. And to that end, I say this: produce more, consume less. It's easy to get lost in the mass-produced media, giving us fantasy movies and streaming series, or music and song that is so easily spoon-fed to us. But if we can create and produce, we can divert our attention from corporate media-based shows and music that's not always relevant or even marketed to us. Join an online group, writing group, or similar such resource for musicians and recording artists, no matter how bad you think it may be. You've created something tangible in the world for like-minded people to gaze upon or bear witness to. Putting it out there to share with others is better for the creative juices that simply blindly, other than simply blinding, taking in what is being fed us like an IV drip by mass media. Stop being the customer, start being the creator.
Amen to that, folks. Yeah, you heard some great words of wisdom today and how to ignite your own creative passions and take actions to bring them into reality this week. I'm looking forward to perhaps at a later date interviewing one of you on the show about what you're creating and what you're making. Feel free to reach out to me on Facebook, Caleb Duarte, KALIBDUARTE. And until then, please do check out this week's artist material, B.J.West, WEST. On Amazon, check out his cyberpunk novels, and also check out Kelp Entertainment. That's KELP entertainment.com for music videos. We didn't get to it this week, but BJ actually did a music video of a younger me. You can tell because I have more hair, in a cyberpunk style music video, and a bunch of other stuff. He mentioned working with a friend of his that has a band. Check out that stuff. Support your local artists. And to what Joe was saying, get off the corporate drip a little. Start creating yourself or supporting artists who are out there independently creating. Greatly appreciate if you do. All right, folks. See you next week. To contact me, you can find me on Facebook, KALIBDUARTE. ARTE. Got stuff on Bandcamp, which is my like a record label store, YouTube, Spotify, all that good stuff. Feel free to reach out for me if you need to know more. Thank you, everybody, for watching this week. Catch you next week. Ciao.